Okay, today is the third in the series, the DORA Deep Dive series, and today we're going to be talking about ICT-related incident management. This is 3 of 5. The next one is in 2 weeks' time. Okay. Very briefly, for those who are new to calQrisk, a brief introduction to us, and then a brief DORA overview just to set the scene. But the essence and the meat of today's webinar is about what's in the DORA Act related to ICT-related incidents and what's in the RTS regulatory technical standards that have been published and the implementing technical standards, because that's the how you're expected to implement and comply with the Act. Okay. calQrisk. We see ourselves as risk and compliance professionals, and we've produced a governance risk and compliance solution, also called calQrisk. And it includes a DORA-specific solution, so we can record third parties and services and activities and all the relationships between the same and produce reports like the Register of Information. We also offer a risk advisory service, and I think that 3000 I'm going to have to update, because I think it's easily 4,000 at this stage. So, but generally our customers in the financial services space, that's probably the majority, with some in the not-for-profit sectors like housing and charities and sports organizations. So that's us. I came across this one last week. I'd known about it for years, but I couldn't attribute it to anybody, but I can now. No plan survives first contact with the enemy. Helmut von Moltke was a Prussian field marshal. And I think Eisenhower must have known this one when Eisenhower said, plans are useless, planning is essential. But basically, you know, when you have an incident, it's going to be different to what you expected. But the fact that you've done the planning and done the thinking will be what will make a difference on the day you have an incident. So do plan, do have a plan that you can adapt, but expect it to be have to be adapted. Okay, again, quick summary. It's a regulation, applies to all EU member states, no exceptions, and came into force 2 years ago, nearly 2 years ago, becomes applicable next January the 17th. So you've had 2 years to prepare, but it's only in the last few months really that the RTS and ITS have been published, and where the detail is probably now clear. And a lot of people are scrambling. So if you're one of those scrambling, you're not alone. It is a tight deadline, and it's tough. There is some rumor, but only rumors that might change, but I haven't seen anything concrete. Okay, it's about making ICT systems, as I say here, better, and better in the sense that they're more secure, less likely to fail. And if they do fail, that you can get them back up and running fairly quickly, which is kind of what today is about. It's about those incidents, and you want to be able to manage them well and get back up and running as quickly as possible. Now, a lot of these guidelines and a lot of this, what's in the Act, I would say, has been around for years. There isn't an awful lot of new stuff. Maybe in the detail, yes, but principles, no. And one thing that I've picked out, I've said this before, is that, you know, to have a financial buffer to cope with the loss and you know, finance the risk rather than actually treating the risk is not really acceptable anymore. The regulators want you to have less incidents, have shorter incidents, less impact on the consumers. And money won't, you know, putting in a financial buffer is not an alternative for this risk. Okay. We're doing 5 in the series of deep dives. We're on number 3 today, and in 2 weeks we'll do one on testing. But today is about incident management. I thought it useful to put in the definition from the regulators. What is an ICT-related incident? So it's a single event or linked events. You can have multiple small ones that collectively can be considered a major one. Unplanned. Now, why would you plan an event of this nature? I don't know, but unplanned by the financial entity that compromises the security of the network, and information systems, and has an adverse on the availability, authenticity, integrity, and availability of data. So think of data breach, not available, or it has an impact on the services provided by the financial entity. You have critical service and that's interrupted. No data is lost or compromised, but you're not providing the service. Okay. The materiality, or when it's major, is actually down to you to decide. I did find some definitions and I'll share them with you, but I think you've to classify and you've to explain your classification. Okay, so what does the Act say? And I've looked at two sections, I suppose, in the Act, the kind of general references and then the very specific ones to ICT or incident management. As expected in the Act, it says, you have to have the mechanisms in place to detect an incident. Now, I've noticed that in recent years, the ability to detect has improved massively. It used to be up around 100 days. It's down more like 16 days, I think, in the recent report, which is a welcome improvement. But still, 16 days, something can be going on for 16 days and you don't know about it. You might think that's still not good enough. Well, it's not, but there we are. So have mechanisms to detect if you have an incident. Have alert thresholds, at what point, and a lot of detection systems have a lot of alerts, and I'm talking about thousands every day, but you want to set the threshold such that you're not reacting to every single alert that are inconsequential, but set the thresholds at realistic and or pragmatic levels. And then what is the response? That you have a response if you do have an alert. Again, it's something that you can plan for. Integrity of reports is referring to, if you have an incident, you've just issued some reports that other people are dependent on, you probably need to go back a bit and see, well, can we stand by those last reports we submitted? Response and recovery. Again, general stuff. We'll get into the specifics in a while. Having a business continuity policy, doing a business impact assessment. I mean, that's you have to do for every business continuity plan. What is the impact of losing this service? What are the dependencies? What are the recovery time objectives, recovery point objectives that we have? You should do that for each of you, certainly for your critical services. Again, if there's something in the Act that you've never heard of, then that would be a surprise to me. Because all of this stuff, policies, procedures, containment measures, if you've got an incident, communication actions, this is not new, folks. Independent internal audit and review, that's probably just good practice that you have somebody who's independent from the process who actually reviews it. I will stress, though, that recording of activities during incidents, and we did a scenario exercise with the client yesterday, and you have to remind people, you should write down the decisions you're making. We don't tend to, and this is such vital information for later when you're trying to do a post-mortem, if you like, on the event. Backup policies, procedures, again, nothing new here. Have backups. The one I will pick out here is maybe redundant capacity. In a previous life, we used to have a spare server in the days of physical servers that we could spin up or configure fairly quickly. It's just having capacity so that if you do have a major incident, you're not caught without the spares, if you wish. So have capacity. And I'm sure you all know RTO, recovery time objective, recovery point objective, that these are all developed, understood, and known. And this is still the generic stuff in the Act, right? Learning and evolving. Encouraging you to know about the threats, to keep yourself informed as an organization of what threats are out there, what vulnerabilities are in your systems. I mean, we get reports, I would say, every second day on any vulnerability, and that we're constantly patching, as I'm sure all of you are. But learn from incidents, learn from the small incidents, and communication. When you have an incident, don't forget to tell your employees, your customers, the regulator. It's very easy to say, and I know as an engineer, go away, I'm trying to fix the problem, but you need to communicate. Look, all of this is nothing new to you, but it's now law. right? So know the details. So let's have a look. This is more in the Act, but it's under the chapter heading on incident management. So here they go into a bit more detail on the management process: detect, manage, notify, the response procedure, the immediate response procedure, and that'll be directed by the type of incident that you have. They say to record all incidents, not just the major ones. You record all incidents because, if you're recording all incidents, you'll see trends, and maybe a recurring incident now gets reclassified as a major incident because it's happened 10 times. Identify root causes. I mean, if you have an incident and you just wait for it to happen again and do nothing, what have you learned? Nothing. So learn from it, and if there's something you can do to reduce the likelihood, do it. Again, none of this should be new to you guys, right? Except now it's expected and you should be doing it. Early warning indicators. I call them calQrisk indicators. If something has happened every Friday at 4 o'clock, you should recognize that. If there's an increase in the number of outages, if there's outages happening to your peers or your competitors, be aware of what's happening. Classification of ICT-related incidents. Now, we'll look at this in more detail, but yes, they do offer some categories, and the RTS goes into more detail on that. So, how do you classify, and what are the parameters? Well, you look at who's affected, the reputation, the duration of it, the geographical spread of it. Yeah, we will look at that in a moment. Reporting, and this is a big part of it. This is but it's reporting of major ICT related incidents. And they're very careful to point out it's major, not every single incident. You should record every incident, but you only have to report on the major ICT related incidents. We'll have a look at that in detail. And of course, in Article 20, the ESA was told to develop the technical standards. So we're going to have a look at that, because that has now happened. They have developed it. And this is the RTS, the Regulatory Technical Standard. And if you haven't found the number yet, there's the number at the top, 6901. So you can, if you Google that, you'll get the detail. I've tried to summarize it here on one slide for you. On the key 6 articles. The first one is general information to be provided in initial notifications and intermediate and final reports. So there's at least three. You could have multiple intermediate reports, but 3 reports: an initial report when you have a major incident, an intermediate report, and then a final report when it's resolved. General information is like, well, which type of report, which type of incident. The financial entity names, that's names of those that are affected by the incident, and their codes, their legal entity identifier codes. Contact details for this incident. Who should the regulator be talking to? The parent of the entity, and the monetary impact. Interesting that this is in the initial report, and that's general information. Specific information: your own internal reference code for this incident, a unique reference code that you would use, the date and time it was detected, description of it, classification criteria that was applied, why this is major. And we'll go into the classification. Actually, why don't we look at that now? Because I thought this is a key part of this. Because if you're going to be reporting a major ICT-related incident, it'll be one or several of these criteria that will have caused it to be classified. Is it that the number of clients or counterparts is a high number? What is a high number? I read somewhere 10%, but there's no rule as to what is the level of materiality. But that was, if you like, a stake in the ground. Reputational impact. Again, when you read deeper on that, are you about to be, to lose your license? Is this already on social media or the broad media, and are you getting slated? The duration and service downtime. Obviously, if it's just minutes, it's small. If it's hours, again, there's nobody saying when does it become material. But if it's long, you will know in your business better than anybody what's material. Certainly, if you're handling a process that's supposed to be done in seconds, and there's thousands of these happening, and you're down for hours, that sounds material to me. Data losses, as data being breached, clearly. I mean, some of these will be major without any question. But data losses covers the availability, the authenticity, can you trust the source of it, the integrity, and the confidentiality of the data. Or it might be just that it's a critical service that a lot of your clients and customers are relying on, and that has been interrupted. The economic impact, again, what's material and when does it become major? But you will have to decide on these because you will have to explain why you're calling it major or not. Okay, specific information in the intermediate reports. You will be given a reference number by the competent authority, the regulatory authority. So now you've got to use their code when you're reporting to them. The date and time that it occurred, and it's different to detected. And if you don't know when it occurred, yes, then maybe you have to give an estimate. When it was restored, if it's restored, the classification criteria that you used. And this is additional to it's, if you like, one form when you're filling out more fields in it, is the way I see it. And to say, like, if you have information in advance that is required in the intermediate, but you have it already, it's fine to include it in the initial report, of course. Techniques used by the threat actor, if indeed there was a threat actor that caused the incident. Affected areas, affected infrastructure, impact on the financial interests of clients. A lot of detail here. Info on reporting to other authorities. So if you have to report this incident to the regulator in Ireland and the regulator in Germany, they want to know that. Temporary actions you've taken, and any indicators of compromise that you have discovered. That's the intermediate report. And there could be, you see, it's reports. There could be more than one intermediate report. Article 4 talks about specific information in the final report, and now you're talking about the root cause, the date and time it was resolved, the date and time that the root causes were addressed. Now, I wonder whether you can actually say they're addressed. Will you have that in the final report if the final report has to be in? I think it has to be in within a month of resolving it, of the last intermediate. Well, the final is in after the last intermediate. Would you have the root cause addressed by then? Well, if it's significant, I would hope you can. What was the resolution? Direct and indirect costs. And again, you'd have to dig deeper to see what they're referring to. It's too much detail for today. Financial recoveries and recurring incidents. And this, maybe at this stage you realize that this is just the 10th time this happened. And maybe what it is, it's because it's happened 10 times. It's a recurring incident that you're now classifying as a major incident because it's happened so many times. Time limits, they expect the first report within 4 hours of you classifying it as major. Maximum 24 hours from detection. So what that's saying is, classify it certainly within the first 24 hours. You have to report it within the first 24 hours from detection. Intermediate, another 72 hours after the initial report and when activities were recovered. And the final is 1 month from the last intermediate, assuming that it has been obviously addressed and resolved. I doubt if you'd be still in business if it wasn't on a major incident. And Article 6 talks about content of voluntary notification of significant cyber threats. Again, this is, I suppose, information collection, the collecting information on cyber threats. I haven't read, and maybe it's out there, maybe Fiona can comment on it, whether if they're collecting this information, whether they're sharing this information with everybody who's giving information into this. I hope it's not a black hole, but where they're collecting information on threats.
Yeah,
Fiona.
there is a communication process being set up. Obviously, we don't know what the Irish one is going to be because they haven't it's still only the act is still sitting as
Right.
the head of bills at the moment. But the general outcome will be to share the communication. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for that. Fiona is our regulatory expert in this. I'm the tech, if you wish, but Fiona has read every single word on this. Okay, so that's the RTS. Just looking at the time, we're okay. The ITS are implementing the technical standards. So they went away and created annexes and said, this is how we want you to report the major incidents. And I've noted that since the previous release that I was looking at to the one I was looking at in the last week, they've added the words major ICT related in front of incident, because I think to stress that it's not every incident, it's to do with major ICT related incidents. So there's an annex one, we're going to have a look at that in a moment, for standard for reporting of all of the information that they're looking for. And submission, Article 2 is in submission of initial notification, intermediate and final reports together. Basically, if you have a major incident and you resolve it all within one day, you can do one report, which can be your final report, which can be both your initial, intermediate, and final, essentially. If you have recurring incidents, then you need to provide aggregated information. Maybe it was the same incident with slightly different causes, or whatever, slightly different impacts, just to aggregate that information. Use secure channels, and this is something that the regulator in each country has to provide you a secure channel to report the information. And if you can't report it on the secure channel because your systems are down, you got to phone the regulator and say, do you have any other way I can report this? Reclassification. There's details there on if after everything is over, you reclassify it as non-major, then again, there's a form, an annex you have to complete to explain your reclassification. Nothing really major there, just common sense, really. Notification of outsourcing of the reporting. You can, if you have, I suppose, a large third party looking after your IT, you can outsource the reporting obligation for major instance to this third party. But you have to tell the regulator beforehand. Not, oh by the way, yeah, ABC company is going to do that reporting. No, you have to give them advance notice. And if you change it, if you cancel it, you've got to tell your regulator, your authority, competent authority, in advance and when it happens. Advise and cancel it. Okay, aggregated reporting. Yeah, the third party, if you've outsourced to a third party, they can aggregate where the incident is affecting many financial entities. So if it's their incident, but it's affecting many financial entities, they can do the aggregation in a single member state. Standard form for voluntary reporting. Yeah, and Annex 3 is for that voluntary reporting of any cyber threats that we said is them collecting the information. So now let's look at the template for submission. And apologies for the size of the font here, but I wanted to get across to you. I'm not going to go into every item. And this is just there's another page of the detail that they're expecting in a report, or in the 3 reports, if you wish, when you're reporting a major incident. And they've classified it as general information, the type of submission, the name of the entity, so details about you and the contact person, just generic stuff. The initial notification, there's about 10 fields you can see here on the bottom left, 10 pieces of information. You know, when it was, the date and time of detection, the date and time of classification. So it might have been detected at 9 o'clock, but you classified it at 12 o'clock. They want that level of detail. And there is, for every single one of these pieces of information, there is and about this much with the instructions and the clarity, whether it's an alphanumeric text that they want, or whether it's just a yes, no, or a date and time, very, very detailed instructions behind each of these. It's a lot of information, but from an effort point of view, I'm hoping that you don't have very many of these major incidents in 1 year, because it's a lot of information. In the final report, you can see there's another 16 pieces. Now, all of these, and there's 76 fields, by the way. It's increasing information as you get to the final one. The final one just has 16 pieces of information that wasn't in the others, but you're adding all of the time to the report, and the final report has all of the information. I would say the practices and things you have to put in place for incident management are not new. I think it's just all good practice, what DORA expects, what the Act expects. The bit that is kind of a surprise to me is how much information they want on an incident. But they are careful to point out it is just the major incidents, and if they're affecting other member states, they want to know about it. They want to know, the geographical spread of that, if it's affecting another member state. And I can see maybe where that came from, that they need to have a better picture European-wide if you have major incidents. I suspect there'll be a lot of over-reporting because what you might consider major, they might not. So I reckon there'll be interesting discussions over the next few weeks and months as to the definition of major. Now, my final slide really is, if you go back to, forget the Act for a moment and say, what's the best advice I could give you? And I'd say, have an incident response plan. Because if you don't have a plan, well, first of all, you're not operating legally within the Act. But even if there wasn't an Act, have an incident response plan so that you have some plan to guide your actions when you have an incident. You can, and you will have to, obviously adapt that plan to the nature of the incident that you have. But, do things so that you can detect, and you're actively keeping an eye out and monitoring, and you can detect when you have an incident, respond appropriately, recover as quickly as you can. Have your plan, have your backups. Now, next week we'll be talking about tests, and I will research this. But years ago, and for many years in a row, the number of recoveries of data that failed was of the order of 54%. Yes, 54%. And I know 10 companies within 3 miles from here that have had that experience in the last 10 years. And if I know 10 within 3 miles, I'm beginning to believe the 50%. And why have the backups, the restore failed? The restore has failed because the backup failed. Or you didn't have the decryption keys. The backup was encrypted and you have lost, or you can't put your hand on the decryption keys. So have backups, but do a test, and do a test restore. Do a lessons learned. It seems like an obvious thing. But in my experience, if you don't do the lessons learned shortly after the incident, your memory will fade. And you think you will remember in 3 months' time, or somebody will remember and update the plan. Not as good as if you do it within, I'm going to say within days of the incident. So you capture all those learnings. And the best organizations are learning from mistakes, learning from incidents. Identify, classify major incidents, intermediate. I think the key piece of work for you between now and January the 17th is your definition of major. There is several, as we saw, classification criteria. So start thinking about that. And I would be erring on the side of setting the bar high rather than low, because it's a lot of work if you're reporting incidents that are not really major, but you've classified them as major. So, but yeah, have a good think about that. A lot of information to gather, and you've less than 2 months to go. So that's me. we still have time for questions if we can answer them. And I'm joined by Fiona. You've heard Fiona already. Fiona is our senior research analyst, and Fiona reads these regulations long before any of us do. And so she has, I'm going to say, a few months head start on most of us mere mortals on questions regulators. So if you have questions, if you can pop them into the chat.
There are no open questions at the moment, Jerry, but I'd just like to revisit the point that we spoke about a little while ago about the sharing of information. As soon as I had the words out of my mouth, I was thinking, no, that's I have NIS 2 in my head, so apologies. But DORA does allow, it does provide for information sharing. That's in Article 45. And financial services providers are encouraged to communicate among themselves, both about incidents and about the measures that they're taking to be more resilient. So I just wanted to clarify that for you.
Was there anything in that, Fiona, about them sharing the information that people have submitted to them? You know, the threats.
I would say that the competent authorities are gathering all the information, and the reason it's been, you know, so specific with all those codes is so that they can accumulate and make decisions and decide who's critical and, yes, communicate on the issue.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks for that.
So sorry for the little mix up there at the beginning. I hope it didn't.
But you mentioned NIS 2. And can I ask you a question? Because you've looked at NIS 2 and you've looked at DORA, and I think there's a lot of overlap. And I think there's some organizations going to be in scope for both. Do you want to comment on NIS 2 and DORA?
Yes, absolutely. So if you're in scope for both, i.e. if you're a financial services provider, then DORA will always take precedent. That's the lex, the principal regulation that you're going to have to comply with. So NIS is secondary. But if you're not in financial services, then certainly NIS 2, the scope has widened. And it, beyond financial services, you've got national infrastructure, national services,
yeah,
lots. Yeah, I mean, I could share the scope with you.
I think what we might do, we'll probably be doing
we'll definitely be talking about it in more depth.
Yeah, in the first quarter of next year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we have one question. A company is classified as small if 50 or less employees. Do we include our outsourcers or just the main company?
Include outsourcers in?
I guess when you're classifying yourself as small.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. I'd have to read the text to answer that one with any with any confidence, but I would say that you don't include your third parties when you're classifying yourself as small, but that doesn't say that your third parties aren't going to be critical just because you're a small company.
Yeah, I suppose you could be a small company and have thousands of customers.
Yes.
That if you had a critical incident, then it's not just you who's impacted, it's thousands of customers. Yeah. So I'd imagine there must be more than one piece of criteria for small.
Mm-hmm. There's another question there about the clarification around Article 45. There is no obligation in sharing information, Jared, you're correct, but it's encouraged, as I said. Yeah. Because I guess for the benefit of the resilience of the entire sector.
Yeah.
And Jared just said thank you. So yeah, there are no other questions open at the moment, Jerry.
Okay.
But if they do come up, people can certainly send them in, and we might do a Q&A paper or something on it.
Maybe at the end of the series, because there have been some good questions over the last two as well, and maybe if we collect those and do release a document at the end with Q&A with all the questions and the answers that we've gone.
That'll be it. Mhm.
Yeah. Okay. If there are more questions, I'm not seeing any coming in. I'm going to say thank you for your attendance this morning. And yes, we will be sending out a copy of the slides. So watch out for that. And see you back here on the 10th of December at this date, 2 weeks, same time. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.